Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Sue. Good to see you.
Great to see you. So we're here today to talk about our teaching and learning portfolio at CCRC. And I'd love to hear your perspective on how this body of work fits into CCRC's broader research agenda on student success.
Well, I think back, and I think a long time ago, we probably didn't necessarily think it was integrated. But I think one of the things that I've noticed about our work since then is that the thread comes up across all of them. So, for example, in our guided pathways work, we oftentimes hear our colleagues talk about the class that lights the spark and gets people interested in a particular area, and that feels to me germane to teaching and learning. In even our old work in advising, where we started talking about advising as developmental work and as a curriculum for advisors, that felt like it had a teaching and learning angle. And then obviously we first started in Dev Ed, spent a lot of time in classrooms. That took us toward curriculum, that taught us that there were English learners who needed additional support, that brought up a lot of questions about the role of technology. So I feel like over time, we've seen the teaching and learning angle sort of become more salient in the various bodies of work that we do. Now, of course, in higher ed, teaching and learning sometimes takes a back seat. So it's a little difficult to study. It's not like K-12 where it's front and center.
Yeah. Are you seeing it in the workforce development strand?
We are. I mean, I think there's a lot of questions, even attention around this idea of whether workforce development programs need to be front-loading the technical skills that students may need in whatever their occupational training program is, what the role of a gen ed core might be in those programs, what foundational reading and literacy skills, what mathematics skills does a student need if they're in welding versus nursing or another program.
I think what strikes me about community colleges is that the student experience is really mediated through the classroom as opposed to a four-year residential scenario where students maybe live on campus. And at the community college, the faculty member is so important to the student having a sense of belonging. The classroom experience really can drive students' interest in their careers in a really meaningful way. And so as a teaching college, it just seems really important to focus on this as related to student persistence, their students' sense of themselves as college-going students. And so I have really appreciated our faculty development work because we know that faculty are, in community colleges, they have a challenging teaching load, they play a lot of roles, and there are a lot of demands on them, and a lot of them are part-time. And so when we've had a chance to look at ways to support faculty, to provide an environment where faculty can thrive, then that, I think, can lead to an environment where students can thrive in the community college.
What are some of the most important things you think we've learned about our work with faculty?
I think for faculty, we've seen some really interesting ways when you give faculty time and space to collaborate, looking at their curriculum together, looking at student work together, going into one another's classrooms, that they can really thrive and learn deeply about what it means to teach in their discipline. And so I'm thinking about the Post-Secondary Teaching with Technology Collaborative, a current project that we have in which we're sort of doing something similar in that we're working with faculty to think about their teaching in online courses. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Post-Secondary Teaching with Technology Collaborative?
We know that there are disparate outcomes in online course taking, and that dates back to our very early work in online learning. And so one of the motivations that we had in developing the CoLab was this idea of trying to figure out what type of intervention may help us reduce some of these disparities that exist by race, disparities that exist by gender, disparities that exist by age. And then I think perhaps most importantly, we had to think a lot about what is this intervention going to be? So we weren't trying to fix mathematics instruction or develop students' writing skills, but rather we selected a group of of skills and mindsets that are more broadly applicable across subject matter areas. You want to talk a little bit about what those are and how we're using technology to support their delivery?
Sure. So we're using a three-part framework: motivation, metacognition, and applied learning. And these are constructs that have been shown to be associated with student success. And we think that they're particularly important in online courses where students sort of have that distance and they need to manage more of the learning on their own.
So when I think about where we could go with this, there's so much that we've learned, but I think there's so much more that we can do. To your earlier point, I think there's a lot of opportunity to better understand what instruction needs to look like in occupational training programs. And so that feels like a space that's really ripe for additional work. I know within our DevEd space, we've made as a field so much progress in terms of identifying evidence-based models that support student success. With each reform, there's always challenges that we confront, and so I know within the co-requisite remediation model, for example, there are still students who aren't successful. Now, I always have to remind myself there were always students that weren't successful, and that number is less than it used to be with the old model, but we still want to try to find out ways to support their success. What are some of the things that stick out to you in terms of areas we could go?
I think technology is something that we need to continue to focus on. More and more students are taking courses online in the post-pandemic environment, and faculty are being asked to deploy instructional technology, and they're seeking it out on their own. We hear so much from faculty about AI and how faculty are thinking about using it in their teaching, being asked to use it in their teaching, and then, of course, how students are interacting with it. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to both look maybe descriptively at what's happening in the field around these types of technologies that are emerging, and also potentially work with partners to explore some best practices and study the types of technologies that are really promoting student success. And those are changing rapidly, so there's a lot more work to do.
So it was so good to sit here and catch up with you about all the work that we've done in teaching and learning and all the opportunities that lay ahead of us.
It was a real pleasure.